Now.
On 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app.
O'Connor and Company.
It is 7:06 on O'Connor and Company. It's a Friday morning, and we love our Fridays because we get to finish out this week, close it strong, and then launch you into that weekend exactly the way you want to be launched. Coming up at 7:35, Bram Weinstein is going to give us a preview of the Commanders game this weekend. Also at 8:05, Eli Lake on the killing of that October 7th mastermind terrorist. And then at 8:35, Hollywood hotshot and actor Hercules Kevin Sorbo is going to join us because he's in the Reagan movie that is now streaming on all platforms. He's Hercules.
I love that show, by the way. It was so great.
Patrice Onwuka, good morning to you.
Happy Friday, Larry.
Amen to that.
Yes.
Listen, we're joined now by Hans von Spakovsky. He's the manager of the Election Law Reform Initiative at Heritage Foundation. And Hans, we're going to need you for two segments here because there's so much going on in terms of early voting and last minute sort of jockeying here with regard to election law and election protocol. So can you stick with us for two segments?
Larry, Patrice, I'm always happy to talk to you for as long as you want.
Oh, wonderful.
Well, so I want to start with something that I don't know if you've researched this or not, but last night at the Al Smith dinner, comedian Jim Gaffigan, who was the MC, he pointed out one potential voting irregularity that might not show up in the polls. Hans, here, listen.
The media has begun discussing the phenomena of secret Trump voters. I don't know if you've heard about this. People who publicly say they would never vote for Trump, but then when they go in the voting booth, they do. It's a small group. They're called the Biden family.
Okay, that might not be a real thing. Although, I mean, listen, it's a little bitter. But in all seriousness, Hans, first, with regard to early voting, it started now in a lot more states, but including what I think most people are concerned about is North Carolina. What is the situation on the ground right now, the rain-soaked and flooded ground in North Carolina?
Well, both the State Board of Elections there and the legislature passed a quick emergency passage actually last week. It was signed by the governor. The State Board of Elections followed up, and they basically relaxed a lot of the rules so that the affected counties could do things like extend their hours for early voting. And so, in fact, yesterday, early voting started in North Carolina. A number of the counties affected announced they were going to have extended early voting hours, for example, on weekends, something they weren't planning on doing before. So they are taking steps to try to make sure that folks who've been hit hard are able to vote. The one thing I would tell folks in that area is if you're relying on the mail, if you want to vote by absentee ballot, don't do it, because the U.S. Postal Service actually announced that they were suspending mail service in parts of North Carolina and weren't sure when they would get it back. So don't rely on the mail. You need to go and early vote as soon as you can.
I think that's true for everyone, especially we're seeing this trend among Republicans across many states, not just waiting till Election Day. So, Hans, let's move over to at least one or two of these key swing states. Michigan, apparently their voter rolls are inflated by over 500,000, I guess, ineligible voters, whatever the case may be. What is going on in with Michigan and maybe other states that are not keeping their voter rolls clean?
Well, I have to tell you, the Secretary of State of Michigan, if somebody asked me who was the worst Secretary of State, most partisan Democrat Secretary of State in the country, it would be Jocelyn Benson, the Secretary of State of Michigan. She is so bad about this that for the past 2 years, she's been fighting a lawsuit filed by the Public Interest Legal Foundation. They found over 26,000 people who are dead on the voter rolls, and she has refused to take them off. That's the kind of person you have in charge of elections there. Look, other states actually have finally been trying to do something about this. I'm sure you've seen the reports about how Texas removed about 1 million ineligible people, including 6,500 aliens. Virginia has taken off 6,300 aliens. And who's trying to stop that? The Merrick Garland Justice Department. They have filed lawsuits against both Virginia and Alabama for doing what? Taking ineligible aliens who actually are breaking federal criminal law when they register, for taking them off the voter rolls.
Also, if I can swing back to Michigan, or stay in Michigan, I should say, because they've launched a new website on their State Board of Elections. I don't know if you've seen this, where it tracks absentee ballots and the return rate. Couple of things about that. First of all, Wayne County, which is where Detroit is located, the major urban center in Michigan, has something like a 47% return rate, the highest in the state. It's an astounding number, I think, this early on, and a lot of people are looking at that number and sort of circling it in a curious way. Does that raise a red flag for you, the number of returns in that area?
Yes. Anytime you see a particular area of a state having a higher rate of use of absentee ballots, and that includes returns, than other areas, that can be a sign or a clue that there's potentially fraud going on. And I would hope that the RNC and others have observers there who are looking into that. Michigan, by the way, has also been sued because Jocelyn Benson has put in a new rule allowing Americans abroad who have never, ever lived in Michigan. She's saying, oh, well, we'll consider you a resident, quote unquote, of the state, and you can vote here.
Oh,
wow.
Goodness.
By the way, as of now, 675,000 absentee ballots have been filed in Michigan, returned. And apparently they can start the processing early in terms of opening envelopes and unfolding them. Things like they can't start tabulating, right? How does that break down? Because like Florida is such a big state, and they give us their results within 3 hours of the polls closing, Hans. But you've got states like Pennsylvania and states like Georgia and Arizona where they take a week or more to count them. Maryland is one of those states too. Why? Why does it take them so long? And why is Florida so efficient?
Well, because they have different rules governing the counting of ballots, the handling of absentee ballots. Florida's rules are so good. They were so embarrassed by what happened in Florida in 2000 that they made major changes in the way they administer elections in Florida, so that now they're one of the top states, one of the best states in the country. And the other states, places like Michigan, aren't. I mean, Michigan does a terrible job. The Secretary of State keeps putting in bad rules. She keeps getting sued. Courts keep saying she can't do what she's trying to do. So it all boils down to who you've got running elections in your state as to how good or how bad you are. I mean, look, another state that was a huge controversy in the last election was Nevada. Nevada is now one of the worst states in the country. They actually mail a ballot to every single registered voters, and yet there are multiple lawsuits going on there because their voter list is so bad. They have people registered at casinos, head shops, gas stations, obviously fake registrations, and they're not doing anything about it.
All right, we've got a couple of more states to talk to Hans von Spakovsky about, specifically Pennsylvania and Georgia.
Yes.
Yeah. And it's a couple of things going on in those two all-important states. So stay with us, Hans. It's 7:15.
WMAL.
Making sense of the news.
Live
From the Home Paramount Pest Control Studios.
Home Paramount, the leader in pest control since 1939.
All right, we're back with Hans von Spakovsky. He's the manager of the Election Law Reform Initiative at the Heritage Foundation. He is our go-to on everything elections, and we're digging in on some specific states. So, Hans, let's go over to Pennsylvania. The Pennsylvania Supreme Court pretty much is preserving the requirement to date mail-in ballots. Is that my correct understanding? Because I guess Democrats have wanted to, or left-leaning groups have wanted to challenge and make sure that you can count mail-in ballots that have a signature but don't have a correct date or have no date at all. Is that correct?
Yeah, no, you got that exactly right. And that was actually kind of a surprise because, a number of years ago, the state Supreme Court was taken over by very liberal Democratic judges. But I think they basically said, what they did is they adopted what's called the Purcell Doctrine, which is established by the U.S. Supreme Court, saying you can't change rules no matter what close to an election. And that's basically what they said.
And based on that, and that's a key provision, isn't it? I know it's astounding to look back. Looking back 4 years ago and realizing that ballots were mailed in and counted that did not have, first of all, the signatures weren't actually effectively checked. And many of these ballots were not dated but counted but every time you must scream at the television whenever you see some news anchor say, well, there was nothing ever found about the 2020 election that was irregular.
No, that's exactly right. And even when things are found, prosecutors and others don't do anything about it. I mean, I hate to keep mentioning this, but look, the 6,300 aliens that Governor Youngkin and his folks took off the voter rolls in Virginia, instead of investigating those cases and prosecuting those aliens for illegally registering, no, the Justice Department is trying to keep them on the voter rolls. That tells you how upside down things are.
Let's move down to Georgia because we saw a lot of strangeness in that state after the election. But then they instituted a lot of election reforms right after the 2020 election. You'll remember Joe Biden called it Jim Crow on steroids. The Major League Baseball moved the All-Star game because Georgia was so racist. Major corporations began a boycott of the state. Now that we're seeing those new election rules and procedures effectively in place for this election, what's it looking like? I'm assuming a lot of people's votes are being suppressed, and we've probably got really poor turnout and returns down in Georgia so far, Hans.
No, it's been the exact opposite. They're seeing record turnout with their early voting already. And in fact, those new rules were in place during the 2022 congressional races, and surveys done of voters, including, by the way, of black voters, showed that those rules were no problem at all. They simply don't suppress votes. Yes. And in fact, one of the best rules they passed, and this is something every state ought to do, was they don't rely on just a signature comparison with absentee ballots. When you request an absentee ballot, they now have an ID requirement for it. You either got to send in a photocopy of your ID, or if you got like a driver's license, write in the serial number of your driver's license. That's the kind of ID requirement that ought to apply to absentee ballots in every single state.
One other aspect of what's going on in Georgia, though, is raising a bit of a concern from how I read it. They have a state election board, and people ran and got on the election board, and it appears that the people who got on there are conservatives or Trump supporters who were very concerned about some of the issues with the 2020 election. So they passed a handful of rules, including one that requires county election officials to actually do a hand count of the paper ballots and ensure that the number of ballots matches what the machine, the counting machine said, the number of ballots. Not how many for each candidate, just the total number of ballots, to make sure that the counting machine counted the same number of total ballots. A judge this week in Fulton County, look at that, Fulton County, he ordered a pause on 7 of these rules that the Georgia State Election Board instituted. This week he did this, right before the election. Have you been able to study these rules and whether this pause by this judge is actually appropriate and valid, and can it be these rules be reinstituted, or should they be before Election Day?
It was a bad decision by a bad judge. And in fact, I was one of the witnesses that testified in front of the State Board of Elections in favor of some of these rules. His reasoning is totally flawed, particularly when he said that when it comes to that reconciliation rule. I mean, look, Larry, Patrice, how long would it take two people? Let's say you're in a precinct of 1,000 registered voters, 600 of them show up and vote. How long is it going to take you to just quickly, at the end of the day, open the ballot box, count how many ballots, paper ballots, are there in the box? Let's say there's 600,
Yeah.
It's not going to take you very long to count those 600 and then say, oh, well, what's the number on the computer scanners? This shows 600 too? Instead, he says, oh, this will take forever. The people aren't trained to do it. It'll be chaotic, so I'm not going to let that rule go into place. That is an absurd claim. But this is a bad judge. This is the same judge who twice now has said that the abortion law that the state of Georgia has is unconstitutional. The first time he was unanimously overturned by the state Supreme Court just about a year ago. But yet now he basically defied the Supreme Court and did it again only a month ago. And they've again stayed his decision. That's how nutty this guy is.
It's crazy.
Hans von Spakovsky,
Hans.
is the manager of the Election Law Reform Initiative at the Heritage Foundation. And Hans, you need to have like multiple phones charged up, ready to go, 24/7.
It
is
X.com.
go time, Hans. This is go time. All right.
I'm going to be busy, that's for sure.
Thank you, Hans.
Thank you, Hans.
It's 7:23.
Now
on 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app.
O'Connor and Company.
It's 7:36. It's O'Connor and Company. Thanks for tuning in on this Friday morning in your nation's capital. Coming up at 8:05, we'll check in with journalist Eli Lake, and we'll get the details of the death of that Hamas terrorist leader who masterminded the October 7th terror attacks. And then at 8:35, actor Kevin Sorbo, you know him as Hercules in that great series in the 90s. He is in the new movie about Ronald Reagan that's now streaming everywhere. It's a good movie. I saw it in the theaters. I'm Larry O'Connor with Patrice Onwuka. Good morning, Patrice.
Good morning. Happy Friday.
Yes, it is a Friday, and that means in autumn, it's a big football weekend. Of course, we've got the Naval Academy midshipmen home tomorrow for their homecoming and hopefully going 6-0, making them bowl eligible. And then, of course, NFL Sunday, where your Washington Commanders will return home facing a very different team in terms of talent from last weekend, where they had a near miss up in Baltimore against a very talented, possibly Super Bowl-bound Ravens team. Well, Bram Weinstein, the Panthers are not Super Bowl bound, I think it's fair to say. So this is a good opportunity to bounce back, wouldn't you say?
Really good opportunity to bounce back. With this new team, every week's kind of a different lesson, and you get to learn things about them. And what I learned earlier this year was how they handle wins when they won in Cincinnati, and everybody started talking about them and started to wonder, are they a little better than people thought they were going to be, and what was Jaden Daniels' trajectory going to be? And this week we're going to find out what it's like after a loss. So I'm very interested to see how they bounce back this weekend.
And in that, to that end, what's the injury situation? Because listen, Baltimore's hard to run against even when you're fully healthy, but we definitely missed Mr. Robinson there in the backfield. Is he back in the lineup this weekend?
Yes, he's going to play, at least as of today. I'm pretty certain he's going to play. His knee injury was not all that particularly serious, but they wanted to hold him back for a week to make sure that he was healthy for the rest of the season. So he should be going today. Offensively, they look all right. Defensively is where they're going to be missing some pretty major parts. John Allen's out for the year now with a pectoral injury. We'll see if Dorrance Armstrong's able to play this weekend. He injured his ribs last week. The rookie, Javonte Jean-Baptiste, is out, placed on IR, probably out for about a month with an ankle injury. So there's a lot of pieces on the defensive line. And there is one thing that Carolina does do very well, and that's run the ball. So their running back, Chuba Hubbard's number 3 in the NFL, third leading rusher. So this is the one thing that actually gives me some concern about this weekend is the injuries on the defensive line.
Well, Bram, will the strength of the offensive line be, strong enough when we look at Jaden Daniels' game on last weekend? I mean, he was pretty strong. 24 out of 35 passes, 2 touchdowns. Do you think he'll be strong enough to overcome any defensive weaknesses?
Yeah, the Panthers are having a rough year on defense. They're the worst scoring defense in the league. They're one of the worst rush defenses in the league. Part of that is injuries. They don't feel sorry for us. They are missing upwards of 7 starters.
Oh wow!
So they're playing a lot of backups. They were probably, if you looked across the board, kind of at just like total talent of their team, There's a reason why their record is what it is. Add into the fact that they're missing a lot of their prominent players, and they've been helpless on defense. So I do expect a high-scoring game this weekend. I do expect Washington to score 30-plus points again, and I'm hoping that that's probably going to be enough.
By the way, it should be noted, this is a later game, an afternoon game, 4 o'clock, which means this is going to have national attention. Is that right? The networks have boosted it up for national prominence?
So we're in the 4 o'clock window, but we're not what we would call the national game.
Oh, okay.
So we remain in a regional window. That's going to happen next week. What they call flexed the Washington-Chicago game, which features the top 2 quarterback selections in the draft this year, Jaden Daniels and Caleb Williams. They moved that from 1 o'clock to 4:25, so that's going to be the game that's going to have the prominent national reach and be shown to the country.
Thank you for that clarification. Also, by the way, not only is it a great opportunity when the weather is still very nice, and again, I don't want to, any given Sunday, I know, but the Commanders are in the driver's seat in this game, so that's always a fun experience. But also, Darryl Green is going to have a really special moment, isn't he?
Yes. Darryl Green's getting the key to the city tomorrow from Mayor Bowser. And then Sunday, they're going to retire his number. This is a new phenomenon for the Commanders. They hadn't done this forever. They had one retired jersey in their almost 90-plus years of their franchise history with Sammy Baugh, the great quarterback. They hadn't retired anybody else's number. They had, not officially, they had not given it out to other players like Sonny Jurgensen or John Riggins, and other players hadn't been given out. But in recent years, they started to retire numbers. Sonny Jurgensen's was retired a couple of years ago, and now Darryl Green's number 28 after 20 years, Hall of Fame career, one of the greatest cornerbacks of all time, maybe a Mount Rushmore person of this organization.
Yeah.
He gets his number retired at halftime this weekend. Wow. It would be very cool.
Yeah. I mean, we've gotten used to the Ring of Fame ceremonies, but you're right, not the retired jerseys. And just for clarification, it's a Redskins jersey that will be retired because that's the only team that Darryl Green played for. Very important to point out. Bram, one last thing I just want to say. I was driving back from a weekend in the rural areas of Virginia during the first half of the game, so I listened to your call for the first half before I got home. And I got to tell you, it's a joy to listen to you call the games right now. You sound like you're having the time of your life. Seriously.
I really appreciate that, and I am. It's been a while. We have a team that has so much. I think the ceiling. I didn't know what it was going to be when we entered the season, but I was very excited. You know, everything's new, and new coach, new front office, very new team, 30-plus new players, and new, young, exciting Heisman-winning quarterback. And it's come together so fast, and it's turned so quickly that it's hard not to get caught up in it. And I am. I think this team has got the arrow is pointing way up here, and it's very, very, very exciting to be part of it.
Having watched the last home game against the Browns, you sound on air exactly how everyone in the stadium was, which is every play, everyone is sort of leaning forward with excitement, waiting to see what's going to happen. So it's fun to listen to you. Keep enjoying it. We love hearing the joy in your voice. Thanks, Bram.
Thanks, Bram.
I really appreciate it. Thank you, guys.
Miss anything? Don't worry, we've got you covered. Get today's breaking news on the Vince Colonnese Show, weekdays 3 to 6, right here on WMAL.
It is the final countdown as we approach the final 2 weeks of this unbelievable, unprecedented, history-making presidential election. We've never seen anything like it before.
This felt like the longest presidential campaign, though, in history.
Well, because it's been multiple presidential campaigns. Remember back when it was Trump versus Biden? That seems like an eternity ago. Well, we've reached surrogate season where the candidates can't be everywhere at once, so you put a surrogate out there to campaign for you. And let's face it, it's hard to be a surrogate for Donald Trump. I mean, he's bigger than life, right?
Yes.
J.D. Vance obviously does a very good job. RFK Jr., you would think is a bit, but, again, he's not Trump. Tulsi Gabbard, it's not Trump, right? But yesterday in Pennsylvania, this guy came close. I mean, after all, he's literally the richest man in the world.
Yes.
He is the founder of Tesla. He's the founder of SpaceX. He's the owner of the biggest social media platform and news service platform, X. He's Elon Musk, and he spoke for 15 minutes in front of a giant American flag, cut 42. Let's listen.
you show what matters by your actions, not your words. And my actions are, I'm here, I'm in Pennsylvania, and I'm here for a very important reason, which is, I can't emphasize enough that Pennsylvania is, I think, the linchpin in this election. And this election, I think, is going to decide the fate of America, and along with the fate of America, the fate of Western civilization.
Cut 43, Elon Musk bears down on border security.
Yeah, and I think the things we all want are simple, sensible, I think common sense things. We obviously want secure borders. We want safe cities. Sensible spending so that we don't have crazy inflation. We want freedom of speech. We want the Constitution to be upheld. And I'm being told at times that these are like right-wing values. I'm like, are you insane? This is literally the fundamental values that made America what it is today. Anyone who's against those things is fundamentally anti-American. And the hell with them. Yeah.
I love it when it takes a naturalized citizen who was born in a foreign country to really understand true American values, and laughs at the fact that these are right-wing principles. Are you kidding me?
Oh, I mean, I love that he's speaking in an accent that clearly demonstrates he's not just, someone who is born here, but he's someone who appreciates the fact that America has given him a chance, and the values and the principles and our constitutional rights are worth defending. Yeah. And I love it. Plus, this guy is brilliant beyond me. I mean, you want to see him in a Trump administration because if he can capture a rocket from a satellite that he's testing, and our rockets, we toss them in the ocean after we're done with it. That's what the government's space program does. He is brilliant enough to say, I'm going to capture the rocket that we send up, and then we can reuse it again to save some money. Imagine what he can do in the federal government.
He's going to be able to reuse that rocket within 5 minutes of it landing and launching. That's the plan. Cut 44 quickly from the richest man in the world.
No, it's true. I mean, there are, a lot of people I know who are on a yacht, sipping a Mai Tai, whatever, in an island, that is a thing I could be doing. But I think I can't do that if I think the future of civilization is at stake, which I do.
Say what you will about these candidates, but when literally one of the richest and most successful and, as you've pointed out, brilliant people like Elon Musk is standing up publicly and campaigning for Donald Trump, that should capture your attention.
It should.
I think.